start. Okay, so today is one of the deepest mysteries in physics. Right, so we're going to see from Richard Feynman. He was an American physicist. He was Jewish. He wasn't so religious. We're going to see when it came to the fine structure constant, physicists all of a sudden they start getting mystical. They start looking for the supernatural because it's hard to understand. So we'll see his quote from his book, The Strange Theory of Light and Matter, right, about quantum mechanics. We're going to see a little bit from Sefer Yetzirah. We're going to see like the very first mission of Sefer Yetzirah. Like, so why I bring this up? So it's interesting. So one question, right, we don't really get to this question a lot, but this seems to be like one of the areas where we can get a glimpse of like what is all of science in the lens of the Torah. Right? So what we have is one of the biggest akashas, and unfortunately, right, there's very, very few Gedolim that have like really worked on this. So there's not a lot of guidance of where to go. I don't have the answers, but we'll get maybe a little bit of a glimpse. But there's not many people that have discussed like how actually does the Sefer Kabbalah, like how do you view science in that lens? Because the big question is this. The big question is the Torah clearly says like that Hashem spoke like with the 10 mamaros, the 10 sayings in the beginning of Parsha Bereshis. Hashem created everything. So everything's created through the letters and the sphira. So we're in the time of Sphira Somer, so it'll be an interesting time to like try to look a little bit into this topic. And in a sense, this is like the cosmic computer. We'll see how it works. This is the structure of the universe. This is the structure of the Tzelem Elohim. Like this is the structure of our soul, how we're made in the image of God. Like Hashem is an infinite being. Hashem has no image. So what does that mean? We're made in the image of Elohim. So this is kind of the structure. And you can see how it's like in the structure of a person. The whole universe is in this universal structure. And we'll see maybe if we get a glimpse of a little bit of what's going on in science. So there's something that's very interesting that happens in the fine structure constant. Right, so this is the biggest mystery in physics. So we'll start a little bit. Here, let me read the quote first by Richard Feynman. Right, so he was not known. Right, he was not known for his level of observance of the Torah. Right, but he was a very famous physicist. He's one of the greatest in the American physicists. So when he said this is how he described the fine structure constant. He said, "There is a most profound and beautiful question associated with the observed coupling constant E." We'll get to it in a second. The amplitude for a real electron to emit or absorb a real photon is a simple number that's been experimentally determined to be close to, and the numbers are a little different. We'll talk about everyone has slightly different numbers. He used the number here of 0.085425455. My physicist friends won't recognize this number because they like to remember it as an inverse of its square, about 137. So with an uncertainty of about 2 in the last decimal place. It's been a mystery ever since it was discovered more than 50 years ago, and all good theoretical physicists put this number up on their wall and worry about it. Immediately, you would like to know where this number for a coupling comes from. Is it related to pi, or perhaps to the base of a natural logarithms? Nobody knows. It's one of the greatest, and he used the word damn, mysteries of physics, a magic number that comes to us with no understanding by man. You might say the hand of God wrote the number, and we don't know how he pushed his pencil. We know what kind of a dance to do experimentally to measure this number very accurately, but we don't know what kind of dance to do on a computer to make this number come out without putting it in secretly. All right, so we'll see why this is such a mystery in physics. Now, where they found this number, so if anybody remembers, maybe you guys remember, maybe you don't, we did the atomic spectrum, the spectral lines. When you put the different elements through a spectrometer, it comes out, we saw these colored lines. And one big question is, if, like, let's say hydrogen had about like 4 or so lines, right? But hydrogen only has 1 electron. So how can it possibly have 4 lines? So we talked about, if you guys remember, a little bit of how the energy from the photon, the energy from light, can come into the electron and boost it up to higher energy levels. And that's how the scientists came up with all these different levels of where the electron shells, now we call it like more of an electron cloud, of how it works, a transfer of energy from the photon right to the electron, and then the electron gets rid of that energy as light again. and then it gives off these spectral lines, and then there was a deeper mystery of like, not only was there all these spectral lines, there's only one electron in hydrogen, they found with all the elements that there was these lines very, very close together, right? So not only was there like one line, now there's two lines like very, very close together, and they couldn't understand that. Like, why is it doing that? They could appreciate, okay, if the electron goes up to a higher energy level, there's one spectral line there, but why is there two very close together? So a physicist named Sommerfeld, he came up with this very, very complicated formula, and then something very, very strange happened. Right, so what happened is, what they did is, so E means electric charge. So if anybody remembers, so an electron has what kind of electric charge?
Positive.
So -1, right? So, but when they wanted to break it down more specifically, the electric charge was this very complicated number here. So then the electron is going to be the -1, and then the proton is going to be the +1. But this is going to be more of the exact figure. And then it's measured in coulombs. So if you guys remember coulombs, right? We talked about like the electrons going through a light bulb in a second. It was like a quintillion of electrons. Like it was this vast number of electrons. The coulombs measuring, and it was basically measuring. Let's see if I can find it here. Is measuring 1 amp. So the flow, if you guys remember, the flow of electrons is in amps in 1 second, and it was 6.24 quintillion electrons every second, like passing, let's say, through the light bulb. So we have this huge number here in coulombs of all the electrons, and this is like the charge. So this is the charge of like each electron. The electric constant. So here we have 4 pi. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I don't want to make it too complicated. Here is what's called the electric constant, or the thing they call it the vacuum permittivity. This is very, very high level physics. So this is like college level physics. But this is basically, we talk about electric fields. This is the electric field that each charge is going to make. So the electron is going to make, this electric field. And then Planck's constant is related to, I think, the transfer, like how much energy is actually transferred from the photon so this is the measure of the photon's energy, the little photon of light, the little particle of light, and it's equal to the frequency of the light times Planck's constant. So it's one of the constants. So we plug in Planck's constant. So this is actually the energy of the photon, and then we have the speed of light. So we write it all out, we get this very, very complicated equation, and then we get to this number, and then we get to the number 1/137. Now this is the big mystery. Now what's really crazy is, when we take all these measurements, we're measuring all kinds of measures of time and space, right? So we get like coulombs, like amps per second, right? And the coulomb, we talked about the vast number of electrons. We're measuring like meters, like here's the speed of light. This is the 300,000 kilometers per second. And we're measuring meters, we're measuring seconds. I believe this was converted to newtons here. So what happens is, if we pull out all the dimensions, if we pull out all the measurements from this equation, something very, very strange happens. What starts to happen is all of the equations start to cancel each other out. So we have meter times meter, so meter squared is then cancels out there, and then second. So now, this is what freaks the physicists out. This is why they start talking about God all of a sudden. They're doing this very, very advanced math, and then they're left with nowhere to go, because all of a sudden they found that this number has no dimension at all. There's no measure of time and space in this equation. And they can't really derive it through math, right? They got it experimentally. They can measure it in different experiments. And then when they put all the figures together, it has no dimensions. So when I first heard about this mystery in physics, I was wondering about something from the very opposite direction of like, how is all of this, right? How is all of this? How is the system, in a sense, the spiritual science, How's what's described in Sefer Yetzirah, and really it's an explanation of what's happening in Parsha Bereshis, the creation of Lemaisa Bereshis, the creation of everything. How is all of this creating everything we've been studying all year, right? How is this spiritual science creating all these protons and neutrons and electrons, right? So what's the connection? So what's interesting is what this is all a measure of, the fine structure constant, is what they started finding is when they wanted to find out like the repulsion of the two protons coming together, how there's an electric propulsion, they found out it has this exact ratio. They have to put in this constant for it to work out. When they were trying to calculate what's the attraction between an electron and a proton, this ratio pops up again. All of a sudden, the attraction of the electron and the proton is exactly this ratio. When they were trying to calculate, well, what's the speed of the electron going around the nucleus, once again, all of a sudden we take the speed of light, we divide it by this ratio, and there it is again. So why is this ratio fundamental to everything that's happening in the quantum level? Everything that's happening in quantum mechanics, at the atomic level or subatomic level, it's all related to this ratio. All right, any questions so far? Now, this is a very complicated part of physics. Everyone's got it. We all got it.
Yeah.
Okay, we all got it. Okay, so let's go on from there. Okay, so they don't really have an explanation. I'm not going to claim. Yeah, you had a question? Okay, I'm not going to really claim that I have an explanation, but there's some things that start to fit very, very easily when we start to compare what's going on here. So one place that they started, well, they didn't really go here. Yeah.
Do you believe that the Kabbalah system is physical?
No, this is a spiritual. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Okay, that's a great question. All right, when you take the gematria of Kabbalah, what do you get? You get 137. So all of a sudden there's a big clue, right? There's a big clue, and they don't know where to go. Right? So because most physicists didn't want to, they don't want to open up like Sefer Yetzirah by the Arizal, they really had nowhere to go. It's just been a mystery for decades, and no one really understands it. But perhaps it here is like showing us something very interesting in its opening. It's possible. I don't know this for sure. But it seems like all of a sudden, if you don't have time and space anymore, right? If you can't measure time and space at this level, maybe and I'm suggesting this is all theoretical. It's all svara. No one's really comparing these systems. But maybe at this level, maybe at this size, it's ruknius, right? We can't actually see it. Now we can see it by like electron microscope, so maybe there is some physicality to it, there is some Gaussianness to it, but we can't really see it, right? We talked about it before, like the wavelengths of visible light are too big, compared to like how tiny the subatomic particles and the elementary particles are. They're too tiny, we can't see them. But yet here, in one sense, like science is saying that this is the building blocks of all life. Like all life is the building blocks of these like little atoms. Right? But the Torah is saying something drastically different. So the Torah is saying that here we have what's called the 32, this is called the 32 paths of wisdom. Right? This is the 32 paths of Chachma, of wisdom. And what it's saying is this, this is what's called the tree of life. So it takes the 10 spheros, and it takes the paths, and if you'll notice, I don't know if this is the Arizal system, the Vilna Gaon Garag is a slightly different system of how he does the letters. But what we have here seems to be some kind of cosmic computer. And if we start taking this very simple ratio here, 1/137, not that we may know like all the connections yet, or the connections on a very deep level, but that starts to work very, 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 very simply with this model here. Because how this model works is basically if you had to take the 1, well, who's the 1 in the equation? Hashem, right? So you have Hashem, you have the Ein Sof, you have the infinite being that's created it all, and then what's called the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, right? Or it's called the Organos, the hidden light. It goes through this structure. So Hashem created this structure. This is like the structure of the whole universe. And then Hashem sends the light through this structure. And then we'll see that it creates worlds, and then it comes down to us, here on earth. Right, so what happens is interesting. So here, what's happening is there's 5 different worlds. So you have like the highest world here, like called Adam Kadmon. Then you have the next world of Atzilus, and then you have the next world of Berea, and then you have these 6 here form the world of Yetzirah, and then you have us down here in the world of Asiya. But what also is fascinating is that these Sephiros, as you know, as we're learning now, going through every day in Sefiros HaOmer, these Sephiros can then act. These 5, like this, Keser, Chachma, Bina, these 6, and then Malchus, they can all act as what's called Partsufim, right? They can all act, and then there's 10 Sephiros that then make up this, right? There's 10 Sephiros that make up Malchus, 10 Sephiros that make up Chachma, 10 Sephiros that make up Bina, 10 Sephiros that make up Keser, and then they work on that level. So then we can get into things like Chesed of Chesed, right? So what we're doing now through Sefiros HaOmer is we're fixing these lower 7, right? We're fixing these lower 7, and there's a relationship with the 6 and the 1 to make it 7. And so we see like the whole world, the whole Teva is based on this 7, like time and space. Everything is here, right here in this 7. And then here, the top 3 are like the intellect. So it's all the ability to think, the ability of intellect. And these are called the mochin, the consciousness, the intellect, the intellectual powers. So here it's all of a sudden we have a very, very simple representation. We have 1 on top, right? So we have the Or Ein Sof, we have the infinite being of Hashem, who created the whole structure, right? Sending this infinite light through the whole structure. And then we get this 3 here. So then we get 1. Right? So then we have Keser also acting as 1. We can have this as Chachma, Bina, and Das acting as the 3, as the intellectual ability. And then the Midos are the emotions, the lower 7. So here it becomes very easy to see all of a sudden the 1 over 137. Right, so here's where it gets trickier. And now here's where I really don't know. Yeah.
Where's the Das?
What's that? Right, so Das is not actually a sphere. It's kind of strange. It's like, but when Chachma is wisdom. It means like we get an idea. Like you hear an idea in Shir, you read it, an idea in the Gemara, and you get that like flash of inspiration you follow. You get that idea, but you don't really have it yet. You hear this amazing Torah idea, you don't really have it. It's just a flash of wisdom. Bina is the process of what you guys are doing all day. You're talking over the Gemara, you're breaking it down. You're understanding it. You're making the wisdom part of it, right? You're making the wisdom part of it. So when you're going back all day between Chachma and Bina, you're using your mind, you're breaking down the Torah, you're learning it, you're getting in a deeper level, then you get Das. Then you get this area where it's in between the 2 of them, and now you get knowledge. When you make it your own, when you take the wisdom and you work on the understanding, then you make it your own. So then all of a sudden we have 1, we have the 3, then we have the 7. So what we're doing now, so to acquire the Torah, what we're doing now is for these 7 weeks is we're fixing this whole system. Every day, not only we're counting, but theoretically, like each week, like we go through a week where we work on being kinder people. We work on a week of Gevurah, of like strength, self-control. We work on a week of Tiferes, of like balancing the 2. Right? Sometimes you have to be, kind, and sometimes there's something that you can't do. Right? So basically, like this column here is all the mitzvahs aseh, and this column here is all the mitzvahs lo taseh. So this is what this is the strength to not do. These are the mitzvahs of things to not, things to not do, and these are the things, the mitzvahs that we're supposed to do, and then there's a balance in between of rachamim. So here, it's like it's sor me'ra, the osei tov, right? So we want to turn away. So this strength, so the mitzvahs lo taseh, the negative mitzvahs, they strengthen us here in Gevurah, and then the mitzvahs aseh of what to do, the mitzvahs to do, they strengthen us here on the thing.
We even say in Shema Esrei when we say Baal Kariyas, and it's
yeah, so right, so this side's din, right, this side's Chesed, and this is the balance, this is the rachamim. So then we go to like Netzach, it's like permanent, or it's called victory, eternity, this is long-term kindness. right? And then here, Hod, empathy. So it's interesting, a Lag BaOmer, like what was the flaw in the students of Rabbi Akiva? They weren't giving respect to each other, right? Hod, it's maybe too deep. So Hod is empathy. So it's Hod Shebakod. It's empathy done in an empathetic way. So now it's the ultimate in caring about each other, like giving, respect to each other, and that's the perfect tikkun for what was going wrong with the students of Rabbi Akiva, and that's why we have Lag BaOmer. So that day is the perfect fix for what's going wrong, and then we balance it all into Yesod, and then it comes into Malchus. Right, so here, anyone's still, I don't know if anyone's still here, but here we see something fascinating. Here we have relationships. So this is like called, generally like the Abba and Ima is like, in a way you can think of it, like this is the crown, this is the king, this is the queen, this is the prince, and this is the princess, right? And then when everything's unified, so the whole goal of the Jewish people is like we are trying to rectify this. It's a whole tikkun we're trying to do. And learning the Torah, doing the mitzvahs, is we're trying to fix this, to connect it to this, and then this, and then what's Malchus? So Malchus is the lower crown, like the kingship on earth, right? So David HaMelech, Mashiach, and then Malchus is Shabbos, right? So the seventh day is Shabbos. So we're trying to, like when we connect to Shabbos, then it's very powerful. Then like we're unifying the whole.
Why is Malchus Shabbos?
What's that?
Why is Malchus Shabbos?
Malchus? Well, first thing, it's the kingship. It's the royalty. It's the king. No, but if we start here, these are the 6 days of creation. Right? The world started with Chesed, right? The world was created with Chesed, right? So the first day is Chesed.
Started with Din, and then Hashem said.
Yeah, but then he switched it, right? So he wanted to start. So the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day. So this is Erev Shabbos, and then seventh day is Shabbos. So what happens is this creates a connection with this. All right. So here is this is all my theory, all my Torah.
The letters next to all the spheres are. That's the numbers that the book.
Right, so that's where only the people that have a deep knowledge of like Bereshis understand how it all works. But
It's not part of your husband?
What?
It's not part of your husband?
It's way beyond what we're going in today, but I just want to give you. But when there's the flow of light, let's say from one sphere to the next, it lights up that letter. That's that letter. Right, so that letter holds that light in between those two spheros, and that's like kind of like the way we can relate to it more is like the Urim Tumim. Like the Kohen Gadol, like the high priest, when they asked Hashem a question, the letters of the Urim Tumim would light up, and like we would get this direct communication. But I think this is kind of like a cosmic computer. This is somehow how the letters are created, or how the letters are being formed when the flow of light goes through like one sphere to the next, like that pathway is the letter. So then also the whole structure itself is related to, this is like called the top of the Yud in Hashem's name. This is the Yud in Hashem's name. This is the Hey in Hashem's name. This is the Vav. These 6 are the Vav in Hashem's name, and this is the final Hey in Hashem's name. So Hashem's name is used like for the whole creation, is the whole structure of everything created. This is like the structure of ourselves. This is the structure of the universe. The structure of the base of Mikdash. So when we follow the Torah, when we act like it's Selam Elohim, when we elevate ourselves, then people can see Hashem's name on us. Like, and then the Shekinah can live in us when we're fulfilling this. When we do this tikkun, we do this proper tikkun in Shavuos, leading up to, the Sir Summer leading up to Shavuos, when we fix all this, get everything flowing, right? So the Dor Day, every day, they were fixing each step. And then they were able to connect the whole structure, and they were able to actually hear Hashem speak to them. Right? But this is the structure of the whole universe. Right? So how does this? So the big question is then, how is this? We know this is the system, but then what gets confusing is how is this creating all of that? Oh, another thing too is, we talked about briefly, like these 10, right? So these 10, we see it's like the main structure. Like there's the, the 10 mamaros, the 10 things that bring the world in existence.
Where's the Kia Sugar Fit?
What? Okay, I don't want to. We got a very narrow window where to go today. But But this is like the makos, where the fixed of all this, right? And then the eseros, right, are also related to these 10. So we see that 10 is a very important structure of the world, right? And the makos was like in Mitzrayim and Egypt, like they had like upset the whole structure, and then the makos were the fix to fix the whole structure. Okay, so what? Okay, here's what I don't know. This is really like, but if possible, that these don't have any dimensions anymore, and if this is the basic unit, but we know that really these are the real units, but these are the building blocks of how everything's created, and the letters, and the 22 letters. So what are these made out of? So these are all, they're made out of light, they're spheres of light. But these are on a rooknius level, right? The spheres are made out of rooknius. There's no goshiness to them. There's no physicality. But this superstructure creates these 5 worlds. And here, at the highest world, like everything is in like a pure rooknius state, right? So it's closer to Hashem. Then as you go lower from world to world, then you start getting a contraction of the light. The light's becoming more and more, they call it thick. Like, you know, in Kabbalah they call it thick. That it finally gets down to the point where the light becomes physical light. Right? So now light we can see. You can't see these. Right? The Nevi'im can only see these when they went into like a meditative state. Like you can only see it through rooknius. You have to block out the physical world. You can't really see these because they're rooknius. But then you get down to the world, like our physical world. So everything keeps becoming more and more physical until you actually get, now you get like physical light, and then even more than that, you get matter, right? You get matter, you get all of a sudden this. So this whole thing, this fine structure concept, is talking about the interaction between matter and energy. But the question is this: if this is all matter, is it possible, so this is my big question, is it possible that these are actually this? Right? So if we look at the basic, now it gets tricky, because hydrogen is always unfortunately tricky, because we learned about hydrogen that, you know, normally every atom has a neutron, and it has a proton, and it has, you know, an electron. Right? For every proton, you can hold an electron. But the problem is this. The problem is, if anybody remembers, we learned about hydrogen, it doesn't necessarily need to have a neutron because there's not 2 protons pushing apart. But here's the thing. Is all the fundamental forces, and this is my theory, are all these fundamental forces, so everything we learned about this year, the electrical forces, the nuclear forces, the magnetic forces, I mean, it has to be that the forces are coming from here. So on one hand, science is talking about these little spheres here that make up everything. We are learning from the Sefer Kabbalah that there are these big spheres that are the superstructure. We're made, our neshamas, our soul, the 5 levels of our soul, are made out of these spheres. So that's us on the rooknius level where we are. And then this is all in the shape of a body. Right? These can be lined out in the shape of a body. This is the head. There's the 2 parts of the brain. These are like the arms. This is the body. Right? This is the these are the legs, right? So it's the shape of the body, and then these 10 break down further into the 248 and the 365. So then in the human body, so not only in the soul is there the 613 parts, but in the body, right, there's the 248, I believe, the white parts of the body, the skeleton, and all the white parts of the body, and then the 365 red parts, the organs, and the veins, and the arteries, right? So then all the parts, right? So here's the thing, is there a relationship? Is it possible that this structure here isn't this basic structure of the lower 6 and the 7? Because it's interesting. So what they're saying now is with the elementary particles, what makes a proton is you have the 2 up quarks and the 1 down quark. So what makes up a neutron, the 2 down quarks and 1 up quark? So you have 3 making a proton, 3 making a neutron. And then these 6 attract a 7, right? These 6 attract, a 7, and that's exactly what we see here in the structure. So it's even more interesting. Let me see if I can find it. These 10 are broken up into the 5 Hasidim the 5 kindnesses coming on this side, right? So you have Keser, Chachma, Chesed, Tiferes, and Netzach are the 5 kindnesses, the 5 Hasidim, and then you have the 5 Gevuros. You have Bina, right? Gevura, Hod, and Yesod, and Malchus on the left side, right? So they break up into 5 Gevuras and 5 Hasidim. So then if we looked at Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes, this would be, if I broke up the left side as the downs and the right side as the ups, then Gevura would be down, and these 2 would be the up. And then if we looked at Hod, Netzach, and Yesod, these 2 are the downs and these are the ups. So we see the same pattern all of a sudden about the ups and the downs, right? And is it possible that the basic structure that we're seeing is this somehow related? Is this the basic structure of the proton and the neutron, and then the Malchus, and then it's catching the attraction between the electrons? And then the interaction in this whole system is not static. These can move around. These can create they create new ones, new spheros. And so my theory is, and I don't have much to go on yet, but is it possible that this, what we're seeing here, is all of this, like billions, trillions, I mean, beyond the number, but is it this system even comes down to the subatomic level, and then we're not seeing any dimensions anymore, because at that small level, it's going back almost to this working state. Any questions, or? No, we have no idea.
Very basic.
Yeah. Alright, so it's interesting. I mean,
That's
maybe
why
it's
it's
a
a
little
theory.
idea of like how the theory can go.
Sure.
Thank you.